Hello, everyone. Um, Thanks for joining us in this session today. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes. I can see some people have logged in. We're expecting a few more people who've registered. But anyway, thanks for coming along today. What we're going to do today is do a very brief overview of what qualitative analysis software is in general. And then we're going to talk about specifically the features in Quirkos and things that make Quirkos unique. And then we're actually going to go through a bit of a demonstration and show you what Quirkos looks like and how we can use that to analyze qualitative text data. So if you're watching this live, feel free to ask any questions in the chat window, and I'll try and answer them as best I can. Otherwise, let's get going. So an acronym we use here is relatively unpleasant sounding. It's CACDAS, which stands for Computer Assisted Qualitative Data Analysis, emphasis on assisted. So it's only a tool to help you with qualitative data analysis. It's not something that can do it for you, as we'll talk about in a minute. But it basically consists of a database which allows you to manage all of your different sources of qualitative data, however you collect them, whatever methods and methodology you've used. And the software helps to speed through the coding process, which is part of the analysis process. And it will also help you, once you've done that, to generate reports and graphs to summarize the data. Now, this coding process is basically a process of deciding which themes or nodes, or in the case of Quirkos, quirks, are particular topics of interest to your qualitative research question, and then finding sections of text in the data which support your particular topic, which are relevant to your particular topic. But it's important to bear in mind that's just part of the process. And CACDAS can't do all of your analysis for you, can't do any of the thinking for you. And it's also not an automatic process. It is required for you to go all the way through the data source yourself, find sections of text which are relevant. Now, there are keyword searches and things like that that will help you if you want to see every time someone uses the phrase doctor or something like that. But it can't go through and say, hey, this is what's interesting to you. Even software which claims to have automated coding tools, the software doesn't know what you're interested in. So you always have to start the analysis, do most of the analysis yourself. It also doesn't do the kind of deep level part of the analysis. It won't interpret your data. It won't interpret your coding. It will basically just show you sections of the text which it thinks are relevant to particular parts of your project. But this can help you kind of contrast with other stuff that's going on. The software also can't write reports for you. It can't write a thesis. It can't write a research paper for you, or draw conclusions from the data and map those to your research questions. That's still something that the researcher has to use their knowledge and interpretation to do. But on the other hand, it can be a very useful tool for speeding up the process and also managing very large amounts of data. The common problem with CACDAS is that you end up, when you're doing qualitative research, with lots and lots of different sources of data. And qualitative data, especially the transcripts from interviews and focus groups, can be extremely long. And the process of going through and finding what people said on a particular topic is very slow and time consuming. So that's where the CACDAS can really help. And Quirkos is designed to kind of go a bit further into helping that, because it's designed to be very easy to use. It was initially designed for use with participatory qualitative analysis. So it's actually getting people who are involved in the research as participants to analyze and interpret the data themselves. So it had to be very easy, quick to use. So it's something we think most people can learn in about 20 minutes, as we'll see today, because it relies on a very graphical interface. And that's kind of what makes it different from some of the other packages like NVivo, MaxQDA, Atlas TI, Deduce, Transana, WebQDA. There's a whole suite of different tools available, but they all have a very similar kind of spreadsheet-like interface. But Quirkos kind of has live interface built in as its main kind of view. And it also has the same interface on all different platforms. And that's a unique thing about Quirkos as well. Our Windows and Mac and Linux versions are all exactly the same, and you can move files across them. And it's also probably one of the cheapest options out there for qualitative analysis. Our licenses don't expire. You get free updates with them because we don't want to kind of tie people into old, outdated software and kind of force people down an upgrade path. But there are limitations with Quirkos. It is a very pure qualitative application. It doesn't do a lot of statistical analysis. We don't consider that to be qualitative research, so it doesn't do that. And it's also text only. So if you've got rich text, or if you've got audio and video that you want to analyze, Quirkos is not the tool for you. You should look for something else. So what we're going to do today is basically show you around, give you a bit of a guided tour by going step by step through the kind of first parts of the project. So we'll start by creating a new project and talking about authorship and different people using a project at once. We'll import some sources of text data into the project so they're all kept together. Then we'll find different ways to describe those sources, so using the source properties feature in Quirkos. Then we'll create a coding framework, which is based on the quirks and the bubbles that you'll see on the screen. And then I'll show you the very basic kind of code and retrieve operations that are the kind of basis of qualitative coding. And that's where you select pieces of text, attach them to a particular theme or node, and then go back and look to see later on everything on that topic. And then in the second stage of this, we're going to go and look at what we can do when we've done some of the coding in Quirkos or other software. We'll look at tools in Quirkos to explore and compare data between different sections, different models. We'll also show you how to generate reports and then talk about other ways which we can export data from Quirkos into other software packages like Word or Excel for doing more analysis or writing up. We'll also talk about the next steps, other steps for going further with Quirkos, and other sources of help if you want more detailed information or if you get stuck at any stage with Quirkos. So let's get straight going. And what we'll do here is just close this for now and go straight to Quirkos. So what you'll see here is the first view that you get when you download and install Quirkos. I should just probably start by saying you can download Quirkos and it's the complete version that you download as the free trial directly from our website for Windows, Mac or Linux. There are links on the front page just to download, so you can do that straight away. You can also go to the download page here. There's a little bit more information about the downloads. But what you'll find is that these are exactly the full version of Quirkos, no restrictions on the projects either. So you can move the projects you've created with the trial version to other computers, share with other people, and keep working them if you buy a license afterwards. Basically, you get 30 days to try the full version, and after that it just asks you for a license key. You can buy a license key directly on the website. There are discounts for different users here. So for example, the student licenses at the moment are about £49. That's $69 US, 55 euros. You basically put that into your website, and you'll immediately buy a license code, and that'll unlock Quirkos on your computer permanently. And yeah, that's just an instant process that happens online. So it's very quick and easy to get going. And then you have Quirkos for life, basically. So it's a very different kind of financial model to the other software as well. So when you've downloaded the trial, you have the full version. What you'll see is the first page here is basically the list of recent projects that you've worked on here. So here's some example projects that I've been working on here. And this basically means that you can just double click on any of these to keep going on a project that you've already been working on. But what we're going to do first of all is create a new project, so I can show you step by step exactly all the ways to go through and use Quirkos. So to create a new project, there's a little button here on the right which says New Project. And if we click on that, it asks us for just a couple of options for the new project. So the first is the author. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the authorship. So Quirkos project files you can share with other people. You can merge project files together. And it's possible to do, when you're doing that, to see what work different people on the project used. So if you're working as part of a team, you can put in your name here, and then you can see the specific coding or the specific codes that were created by different people working on the project. And you can decide whether you want to keep those or remove those or compare them in some other way. So the author can be absolutely anything here that you log the session, and you can change that session by session. If you want to say Daniel after doing a course, or Daniel on a bad day, or anything else you want to tag that particular session with. We'll just keep that as Daniel for now. There's two other options here. The first one's fairly self-explanatory. That's to password protect the project. If you're working with confidential data, that will securely encrypt all of the text in the project so that nobody else can read it without the password. No, there's no way for us to bypass the password, so please don't forget the passwords on your projects. There's also the option here for structured questions. If you're doing a project which involves taking structured qualitative data, so for example, from online surveys, where the same question has been asked to each person, you can use a structured questions project. And that basically means you don't have to go through and type the different questions that you ask to all the different sources. But for the kind of qualitative example we're going to do now, we're basically looking at some semi-structured interview transcripts. So we're going to keep that off for now. So I'm going to click here on the new project, and this pops open with a dialog which just asks me where I want to save the project. So I'm going to be very dirty and just put this on the desktop. I'm going to put Doctor Project, and wherever I keep that on my computer, that's going to save all of the work that I've done and all the text sources together. So that one file you can just email to yourself, send to other people, back up on Dropbox or something like that. Make sure you've got copies everywhere. So it's very easy to back up and share with other people because everything is kept in that one little QRK file on your computer. So I'll click the Save button. And now that's created the new project and it's ready to go. So at the moment you'll see everything's blank, and the screen is basically split in two with this divider here. So in Quirkos, the left side of the screen is where we show our frameworks, the bubbles which describe the topics of interest that we have in the project. And on the right side, we've got the actual sources of text that we bring in. So I'm going to click on the bottom left button as it suggests down here, bottom right, sorry. And that pops up this dialog here asking us what kind of sources we want to put in the project. There's a bunch of different options here. The first is to put in a new blank source into the project. And that's quite useful if we want to keep notes or memos, because we can type directly into any of the sources that we create, but this creates a blank one to in which we can type. And you can also copy and paste into these as well if you want to do that. If you are copying and pasting, you've got this option here, import source from Clipboard. And so if you've copied and pasted something, I don't know, Facebook post or part of an article or something like that, you can create a source directly from whatever you've got in the clipboard. You can also select individual files, select CSV files if you've got something exported from Excel, spreadsheet software, or an online survey platform like SurveyMonkey. And there's also options here to bring in an entire folder of files at once or just specific files. I'm just going to select a single file to start with. So I'll choose that option here. It asks me where I want to find the file. So I'll click on Select File. And then if I go to the desktop here, I've got a new example project. And I've got basically here some Word documents which are transcripts of interviews, made up interviews in this case. And now the kind of formats that Quirkos support are Word documents like this, so docx files, PDF files which contain text, and also plain text files like TXT files and rich text files. So you can basically bring in from most of the kind of sources of text that you might have, or convert in Word or something else to something that you can bring in. So I'm just going to click on the first one here. So that's Glenn's source. So if I double click on that, it gives me a little preview of the source. So yep, that's the one I wanted to bring in. I'll just click on the import button here to bring in the text. Right, so that source of text has now been copied into the project. We've got it on the right side of the screen here, and it's now kind of embedded in our project file. So we don't need to worry about that again. It's going to be moved with our project. What I'm just going to do for your benefit, though, is the bottom left of the screen here, you'll see the settings button. There's a bunch of different options here. I'll show you very briefly. You go to the general project preferences. You'll see here we can change the width and size of certain things, so the highlights column in the middle. We can also change the size of the font. So I'm going to make that a bit bigger because I want it to be clear for you guys as well. Just click on the save button there. Okay, that should be a little bit easier to read. So we put in one source of text, and we've got one more here, actually. You'll see on the bottom of the screen, you've basically got these tabs, which allow you to tab between the different sources you have in the project. And there's also here a button which has got a long list of all the sources if you want to filter to find a particular source and select sources to show. These tabs along the bottom by default show the last 3 sources that you've been worked on. So if you want to show another one, you can just click on the source here and it will open. So I'm going to bring in one more source of files. So exactly the same as I did before. Import source, select a file, find the location, and I'll bring in Sarah's text this time. So in this example, people are talking about how they use their local doctor's surgery, so their family clinician, their GP in the UK. These are made up interviews, but kind of the kind of thing that you might be looking at. So there's a bunch of different themes here that might be of interest. And what we're going to do while we're working on these sources is actually find some other ways to describe them. So at the moment, we've got the names, Glyn and Sarah, which was taken from the file name. We probably want a bit more information for that. And for any of that kind of metadata about the sources, we define that with the source properties. And we access that with the top right button here, this kind of grid view here. So if I click on this while we've got Sarah's source open here, we can enter different properties for her. So the title of the source here is Sarah, and we can change this to capitalized properly that wasn't in the file name, give them their full name, view 7 or something like that. But we've also got blank space here in which we can create properties to describe the source. So, for example, one of these might be something like age or gender, so basic demographic information, but also information about the interview itself, where it was conducted, who was the interviewee, the date, or absolutely anything which is specific to the source. So if I click on the plus button here, I can quickly add a new property. So we'll create one called age. I'll give Sarah the age of 22. So now you can see we've created a property, which is age, and a value for that property, which is 22. So now the software knows that Sarah is 22 years old. And in the future, we can use that to refine our results by age, see people who responded just from a particular age or above or below a certain age or within an age round. So it's very useful to do this at some stage, but you don't have to do it immediately when you bring in your sources of text. So I'm going to click on Glyn's tab down here. So open Glyn source, and you can see that we've got age here, which has been defined as a property, but it says no values associated. We didn't say how old Glyn was. So with this drop-down box here, we can choose any other values which we've put in the project already. So 22 is already there as an option. But let's create a new value because Glyn is actually 33. Okay, there. And now we've got Glyn is 33 and Sarah is 22. Now with the properties and values editor here, we get a lot more control over these. We can actually change how we spell age here. We can make it a multiple choice category if there's something which has more than one value. We can choose to sort it alphabetically. We can remove that property. We can add new values. So let's add a new property and value now. So we'll create one which is gender, a value which is female. So gender, we can see we've got an option here for female. We'll create a new value here, which is male. With the properties and value editor, we can change these at any time. So this could be a woman. This could be man if we want to change that in the future. So we can change gender here to, doesn't quite make sense for woman or man, but anyway, woman here for the gender. If we go to Glyn here, we can have man as well. So these properties can be about absolutely anything, and the values can be absolutely anything. So you can have comments and notes in here as well. So if you want to have interview reflections, for example, you can have actually very long strings of text in here. So the kind of thing in a qualitative research project you might want to note is whether the person was nervous in the interview. That might kind of influence the context in which you interpret what that person is saying and sharing with you. So you can have something saying here like, this was in a noisy location, person was nervous. So that's okay. And we can do that for any of these. So there's no restriction on the length of these. So you can use these for comments and reflections, as well as kind of the discrete data like age, gender, or anything else that you might have about it. If you're doing a literature review using Quirkos or other qualitative analysis software, this is where you would also put in things like author, the journal title, the volume number, page numbers, and that way you can use it to also generate your references. Okay, so I'm done with the source properties for now. There's actually, you can graph them here with the properties overview at the top. It's not going to show us very much useful information here because we've already put in two sources and not really defined them very well. So we'll close that for now. But if you want to see, you know, the gender or age split between your sources when you've entered like a dozen or so, then that can be quite useful. Okay, so we've brought in some sources of text. We've described those in different ways. And what we're going to do now is start developing our coding framework. So there's two very basic ways in which you can approach coding of qualitative data. Well, actually, there's dozens, but as a very kind of hard and fast rule, you can do kind of emergent coding, which is also sometimes called grounded theory, where you create the themes on the fly based on your reading and interpretation of the data. And there's also kind of more structured framework analysis, where you create that framework ahead of time. So you know the kind of things you're interested in looking at in the data, and then you just attach certain bits of text to those as you read through them. Now, you can also do something in between. You can do in vivo coding, where you actually look for specific words that people are saying. And Quirkos will allow you to work in any kind of way like that you choose. But for starters, let's start by creating a couple of themes, which I know are going to be interesting here. So these people are talking about how accessible their doctor's surgery is, how good their doctor's surgery is. So I'm just going to click on the plus button here. And I'm going to create a new property here, which is called parking. I know that one of the things that people are always talking about is how difficult it is to park at the doctor's surgery. So when I clicked on that plus button, it created a new quirk, which is a node or a theme in other software, a random place and a random color on the canvas. And what we have here is the ability to put in the title of it. So this one's going to be about parking. You can also put in the description here, which is a bit longer if that's not obvious. This is especially useful if you're working with other people or if you're using a more kind of abstract topic name and you want to kind of describe exactly what you mean by that. You can also change the color here if you want to. You've got lots of colors to choose on. Parking, I think that should be red. It's such a horrifying thing. There's also the option here for levels. Now the levels are a way to kind of group categories together. And we'll look at that at another date. But basically, we're just going to click on save here. And you'll see we've got a little bubble here, which is called parking. And that's what we use to keep all of our little bits of text together, which are about parking. So here's a question straight away. Great. Did you have any difficulty parking? Actually, today wasn't too bad, yada, yada, yada. But I know all of this is about parking. So what I'm doing is just going to click, hold down the mouse to select a piece of text, just like you would in any other software, and then click and drag in the center of the text and drop that onto the parking bubble. Now, what's happened is that's now been added as a section of text that's about parking. It's been added to this bubble here, and we've got this red stripe here, which shows that it's been highlighted to be about parking. Okay, and you can see that's been red color coded there. So if we go to, we can read through this. I don't think anyone else is talking about parking. No more discussion about parking here, but let's look at Sarah's interview. So we just use the tab here to flip to Sarah. So are they talking about parking? Yes, how is parking? So here's a section about parking. And so we'll drag that text onto the parking bubble there. What you can see has happened now is in Quirkos, the size of the bubble is represented by how many different excerpts of text that you've added to it. So the more text you've added to it, the bigger you get. And this is useful because it shows you over time what themes are emerging, or at least you've coded most often. And if you hover your mouse over like this, you'll get some more information. So there's one sections which have been highlighted in Glyn's source, and 1 out of 1 which have been highlighted in Sarah's source. And if we double click on any of the bubbles at any time, we will see just the text which is about parking. So there on the right is the 2 sections of text which are about parking. And if I want to do something with those, so say I'm writing up a section in my report or a journal article which is about parking, I can use this button here, All, to select all the quotes, and then the copy button here to copy them to the clipboard. And now if I go into Word, I can just paste in here the text which is about parking. And it's complete here with the source name of where that particular quote came from. So there's already a very quick way that the software is helping you manage the data and integrate with other software so you can code it. Now, if any time you get lost, you want to go back to the main screen in Quirkos, just click on the home button here and you'll go back to the main screen. Right, so we've created one bubble here. Let's create another one. And we shall call this buses. Now let's call it public transport. Public transport. We'll keep that green. We don't have to put a description. So we've got this other bubble here for public transport. This person says, how do you usually get here? I take the bus if it's just me or my daughter. So that's about public transport. So I'm going to put that section into public transport. But I could also say, I could be a little bit more specific here. So this person's talking about the bus. So I'll create another bubble here, which is for the bus. Blue is fine for that. And I can create a subcategory of public transport, which is called bus, just by dragging and moving the bubbles around and putting one on top of the other. So if I drag bus onto public transport, it's created a subcategory called bus. And now I can say, in this bit here, this is all about the bus. I can drag and drop that onto the bus category. So now we can see here with the highlights that this section of text is about the bus. This whole section is about public transport more generally. But I wonder here if, okay, let's do a little bit more. So we can add a bunch of different public transport options here. So we can also have a train. We can put that on there as well. And we can also have subcategories. So if we wanted to say that this was a local bus rather than a national bus, we could drag bubble onto the public transport, then onto the bus category. And then we've got a subcategory here. And if you want to add text to one of these subcategories, so if we want to put something on the local bus, this is about a local bus, we can drag and drop onto public transport, then bus, then local. And this kind of popping out system really helps us when we have got lots and lots of different quirks, because we can kind of organize and arrange them. Now we can drag and drop to move these bubbles anywhere we like. We can also undo at any stage by pulling out the categories like that. So if we want to pull those out, we don't want to decide that bus isn't a subcategory of public transport, we can put them in and out and back again. So there are very many different ways that we can play with the different categories in here. So what you'd probably do now is, if you're doing grounded theory, you create these as you go, as you read through. So you might read through, and so people talking here about relatives, that's important. Taking the relatives to the doctor. So it's their mum coming to the doctor and her daughter. Okay, so we might create subcategories for different types of relatives, so grandparents or children. And we keep going in this way, finding sections of text, dragging and drop it in there, and adding more data to it. And that's probably what you'll spend the most time in the software doing. It's this process of going through, reading, interpreting the data, and especially when we get to kind of higher levels of abstraction analysis, when we're wanting to look at things like difficulties. So these steps are a problem. There's an accessibility issue here. So when you start to create more nuanced and more difficult kind of categories that more closely match your research questions, that's when you'll start to spend quite a lot of time thinking about where particular sections of text belong. But you'll always have the option to manipulate them here. So we can do things like, if we right click on any of these bubbles, we get extra options. So we'll get the quirk properties here, which we looked at before. But we can also do things like merge quirks together. We can duplicate them if we want to split them apart or rename them in some way. And obviously remove them completely from the canvas. We've got the things here that overlap view, for example, in the quirk overview, which shows us all the text on them. So Quirkos gives you lots of different ways to manage your codes as you go through. And as you start to have hundreds of them, you'll start to find other useful features here in the view button. So for now, we've got, we've basically arranged things how we want them to be, and that works quite well for me. But what we could do here is go to put them in alphabetical order, or we could even put here the number of sections of text which have been coded to each one. We've also got the option here to put on the tree view. So this is a kind of more list view, which is a lot similar to what you'd see in other qualitative software packages. And this is quite useful if you start to have lots of codes, especially if you have lots of subcategories, because you can see them all at one time. But this works in exactly the same way. So you can just drag and drop this onto any of the sections here to code it. You have all the options to right click on them here. So this is a full view itself. At any stage, you can just untick Quirkos' tree view to go back to the main view, or no arranging to put them exactly how we put them together. Because for me, there's lots of different ways that I arrange them apart from just these kind of categories and subgroups. Similar kind of things like relatives and difficulties and parking and public transport. I might start putting them kind of close together. And I might also start thinking about having common color schemes for them. So maybe all of the parking issues are a certain shade of red or something like that. So however you want to work with the software, Quirkos will help you kind of visualize and manage that data. So the other option here, rather than reading through all of it ourselves, is to do keyword search. So for example, let's create a new topic here, which is waiting rooms. Now this is another issue which is in the text here. Make sure I choose a slightly different color. And then if I click on this little search button here, bring up the search panel, and then I can directly search for particular words. So waiting. That will show me all of the instances across all of the sources I've got in the project where the word waiting comes up. If I want to see more of the quote, so this is, I can't see the whole sentence here, but I want to, I can click on this ... to load a bit more. So this is all about the waiting room. So I can drag and drop results straight from the search results onto the categories like that. So that's something on the waiting room. That's about waiting for letters. So actually that's something a little different. There's someone saying something about the waiting room. I'll put that there as well. Now there's also a couple of other options here. So you can search for whole words, waiting, weighted, weights, things like that. There's also a synonyms database built in, so it doesn't have another word for waiting. Another word for wait? Yeah, await, delay, expect, hold, look. So if we wanted some of these to go for as well, we can put those in, and then it's searching for all of those other words as well, which don't appear in here. But that's another useful way, because the trouble with keyword searching is, obviously, if somebody, instead of using the word waiting room, says, you know, sitting room, then that's not going to come up in your analysis, and you might miss a very key thing, which is why you usually have to resort to a close reading of qualitative text, even if for fairly simple things, because people don't always describe things in the same way. So unless you're doing specific kind of linguistic analysis of how people use certain words, then this can or cannot be particularly helpful. Anyway, that's the keyword searching here. And that's the kind of basics of the work. And by double clicking on things, the code and retrieve. So we can double click on public transport and we can see all the different things together, or just the text, which is about local buses or something like that. So that's the basics. Now, this is the stage in our workshops where I suggest people either need to go away and spend hours, weeks, months reading through and coding a lot of data. But for the sake of this demonstration, we can cheat. So we're going to open a project which has already been coded to, so that we can show you what it looks like and some of the tools for more coded projects. So I just clicked on the project button there. You'll note that there's no save button. So Quirkos saves all the time. There's no way that you can lose data if your computer crashes or Quirkos crashes, because it presses save for you basically after every action. So there isn't a save button, but you can click and do a save as if you want to capture your work at a particular stage in time. But you can just close Quirkos, you can open another project, and everything that you've done in your project is saved. So I can just go straight now and open a different project. So there's the one we were using before, Doctor Project. I can just click on referendum coded example here. And this is another research project that we did and we use in workshops. This is people talking about, it's basically the Scottish referendum for independence, which happened a couple of years ago. And you'll see we've got all these bubbles here. We've got lots of different categories here which have been created. Lots of things which have been merged together, subcategories. We've got a lot of different sources in here as well. So we've got about a dozen different transcripts. They're all fairly long, but they've been completely coded. So this was about a week of work to analyze about an hour's worth of 20 interviews, which reached about an hour's length transcribed. That one was 32 minutes. Yeah, that was 33. So anything from half an hour to an hour, I think. Yeah, that was 49 minutes. So now, obviously, so certain things like the keyword search tools become a lot more powerful, but also some of the ways of kind of looking to see what's going on across here. So we want to see everything that people said about worries, what were their worries about the Scottish referendum for independence. We double click on that and we see here all the extracts across all the different sources and everything that people said, which we tagged as being about worries. And with these codes, highlighted strips here, you'll see all the different codes. And in the bottom left of the screen here, as I go over those, you'll see the name of them if you can't remember what the color represents. That's changing opinions, other people, the vowel, worries, no, polls, parties, etc., etc. So I'll click on the home button to go back. Right, so now we've got quite a lot of coding and we've got quite a lot of codes here. What we can do is explore the data in a bit more detail and see if there are any kind of connections or surprises in it. So maybe we want to see, for example, what did people say about the Labour Party? So we hover our mouse over there, it shows where the different quotes are. We've got 96 different quotes about the Labour Party. So that's a political party in the UK. And if we right click on that and choose show overlap view, what that will do is show us every situation like this where the Labour theme overlapped with another one. So I've done a kind of fairly reductive coding here where there's a large number of kind of quite short codes, very kind of simple basic ones which occur a lot rather than kind of high level codes. And what that means is that there's a lot of overlap like this, and it also allows me to explore connections between the different data. And I'll show you what that means. So if I right click on this Labour bubble here and choose the overlap view, this shows me all the different places where this overlaps in a kind of bullet target, sorry, not a bullet kind of thing. And what this shows me is the theme which overlaps most with Labour is actually SNP. So people, when making a comment about the Labour Party, were also talking about the Scottish National Party. And that reflects something that's quite clear in the interviews, is that people saw the two parties to be quite close in terms of policy and philosophy. And if we click on the SNP bubble, it will then show us here, there's 24 pieces of overlapping text, but it will show us all of these sections of overlapping text. So this is every time someone's talked about the SNP and Labour together in the same quote. So all these left-wing politicians have been ditched. Let's give Labour a bloody nose and let's vote the SNP. So that shows us all these occasions where things go together. But what you'll also see is that people are talking about individual policies here, individual politicians, Scotland, and the no vote here is closer than the yes vote. So Labour was campaigning for no in general. And the further out we go from this, the less overlap there is. So that it's kind of densest towards the centre. And out here, nobody was talking about Labour and currency or the EU or newspapers in this example. So we click on that, there's no quotes to display. But we can go back and press the home button. And we can do this for any of the other ones here. So for example, let's see what people were saying about general politics. Actually, that's quite a good one. Show overlap view. And what that shows us here is that Scotland, the issue of Scotland was the kind of thing which came up most when people were talking about general politics, but also these issues which became subcategories, so local representation, Westminster policies. So depending what your research question is and how you've coded your data, this can be a very useful tool for drilling down and seeing the different connections between your themes in the data. And you can export these views in the report as well if you want to share those with other people. And again, if you want to show all the quotes which are about general politics in Scotland, you can select and copy them all here, or just particular ones here with the one button. So I'll click on home. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is show you how we can use the source properties to explore the data. So if you remember in the previous example, we used the source properties in this button up here to define basic demographic characteristics. So we've got the same in this project too. We've got gender, occupation, how people voted in the referendum, and another one called test, which I've obviously used in another workshop. But if I use the query view here, this allows me to explore lots of different aspects of the data which is in the project. So this button here chooses basically what we want to run a query on. So we've got the properties here, the source properties. We can also look to get results from particular authors, or work that was done on a particular date. We've got the levels, we've got source titles. We just want to see results from one particular individual, one particular source. But I can keep the property selection here. We've got gender, so okay, that's fine. I have gender equals female. So those are the two options there, female, male. I will click to run the query. And now what this gives us below is basically all the instances, all the results from people who we categorize as being female in the project. And so women were talking about no, the no vote most, and then independence. By clicking on each of these, this is in kind of descending order here. You can also see on the right the actual text, so what they were actually saying. But what's quite useful is we can also use this to do comparisons. So if we click on the comparison button here, we can then choose on the right gender equals male. So basically we've split the screen in half and we can run two queries at the same time. And if we update that, we'll see that, okay, so that's interesting. Men were talking about the SNP party a lot more than women. Almost twice as much. Now, of course, that could be because there were more men than women in the sample, but I know it was 50-50. It could be that there was more coding done, so it wasn't evenly coded, but it could also represent the fact that people were talking about men were talking about the SNP more than women. And knowing this data set, I suspect that was the case. So we can actually go and see the text here, read this through, and see if there's a qualitative difference as well between the way women and men were talking about this particular political party. And that might reveal something very interesting about how they engaged with different genders, or what kind of policies were appealing to them on the importance of Scottish independence in this debate. So again, these can also be exported to report here. We can also make these queries more complex. We can we only want we want women who voted no. So there we've kind of refined that as well. So there's lots of options here. You can kind of add more and more things that we want. If you want to only see women who are students who voted no, we can run the query, and yeah, there weren't any. But we can keep adding these different sources here and explore them more and more. Okay. So that's basically the source queries here. So I'm going to click on the home button and go back again. So now the next couple of things that I'll show you very briefly are how we get data out of this. I've showed you the copy and pasting of quotes before, but let me show you the reports. So there's a couple of options in the report here. So you can generate word clouds. That's quite a new feature in Quirkos. And those are quite fun. They kind of show the frequency of different words that appear in the project. So kind of a like a linguistic analysis. But if I click on create report here, this basically creates a kind of summary report of all the data and all the coding that we've done in the project. And there's various different ways in which we can alter this, we can customize the formatting of this and share in other people. So you see this is just coming up on the screen here now. And basically this is split into two sides. So on the left side of the screen, we've got what the report will actually look like. And on the right are the options for what we want to put in there. So we can choose, these are report info. So just by unticking these boxes, we can choose what sections appear in the report. So we've got a summary of the sources, how many we put in them, who put them in when, how long they are, how many quotes are in each one. We've got summaries for the quirks, so the themes we put in there, how many codes there are, who created them and when. So there's a lot of detail in the report. You can choose what to turn off and on. There's a graph here showing, there's pretty much, exactly 50-50 split between women and men in the project. This shows here that most people were retired in the project, 17% students. And there's a slight overrepresentation of people who voted no in the project versus yes. In fact, that was actually reflective of the final vote, the final outcome. And so it's probably actually a good piece of sampling. And then below that, we've got the views of the canvas and the other cluster views we can put in here if we want. And we've also got the options here by theme. So here's everything which people said. Everything people said about politicians in the project. So basically all the text from each source with the kind of structure here with the hierarchy. But we can also show everything by a particular person said. So if you want everything Julie said on all those different topics together, you can choose to have it in that way. You can also show more detail. So who did it and when. We can include the properties. So we can see that that quote is from someone who's female and what their occupation was. So lots of options here, again, that you can copy and paste from. And when you've got it the way you like, you can either open as a web browser, so save it as a HTML file, which anyone with a browser can open, so they don't have to have Quirkos to look at this. You can print it out directly, or you can also create a PDF file. And that will create a pretty big PDF file in this case. Which has got all of the quotes and all the kind of layout that we wanted it to have. I thought that would automatically open, but it has not. So that's something you can also open. Oh, it's come up on the other screen. I'm sorry. So here's a standard PDF which you can print out or modify, or you can open these PDF files in Word now or LibreOffice or something like that if you want to edit them. Okay, so that's that very quickly. It's the reports. And the last thing that I'm going to show you now, just before we wrap up, is some of the other export options. So click on the project button here. You've got this option here to export sources as a Word document. What this does is create an annotated transcript, basically, based on your coding. So if we choose all sources, that will put all the sources into one long Word document. So we'll call this ref Word. And this starts, here we go. So it's created a standard Word file, which you can send to anyone who's got Word or Google Docs or LibreOffice, where all of our coding is shown here with these color-coded highlights as kind of comments. So that means someone else who doesn't have Quirkos can see exactly how you coded all the text. And if you want to print it out and read it away from the screen, but you could still get to see the colors, and you still get to see how you did the coding, and that's the option you've got here. So we chose this nasty red here for bias. So that's one useful option here. We don't need that document. The other option here is the export CSV files. What that lets you do is actually create a project. Put it in here. It basically creates files that you can open in Excel with all of your coded data. So if you wanted to do quantitative analysis, or if you wanted to do more kind of refining here, then it's very easy to do this. So if you put on the pivot table here, that allows you to kind of very quickly kind of refine the results. So if I want to see everything, so I can see, for example, everything by a particular party. I can see everything which was from a particular person. So there we've got everything sorted in that way. So again, this gives you a lot more options. And if you want to do statistical analysis, you can then put it into Excel or even SPSF if you want to do some proper stats and explore the data in a lot more depth. So though we don't have any quantitative features directly in Quirkos, we do allow you to export to formats that will allow you to do that elsewhere. So that's pretty much all I was going to go over today in the session. If you've got any questions for something I've not covered that you'd like to see, do let me know now. You can always email us at support@quirkos.com or email me at daniel@quirkos.com. Always happy to answer any questions about the software or qualitative approaches in general if I can help. And also don't forget the other resources which are on the website. So there are a lot more video guides here. The Learn Quirkos section here, you'll see lots of different useful things. So there are 5-minute videos, 20-minute videos, more detailed walkthroughs, as well as videos which are just basically 1-minute video guides of just how to do different things. That's the Bit Guide series here. What they'll do is show you, just how do I do what are the view options? How do I code text? How do I do the search? So you can just watch a 1-minute video on these things rather than having to trawl through the whole thing. We've also got full manuals, so the very detailed menu here. There's a step-by-step guide, which is quite useful. PowerPoint slides if you're wanting to do teaching, teach Quirkos to a group. We also do webinars. If you are teaching to a group, just let us know and we can do a virtual or face-to-face video workshop for your group. So there are lots of support materials available, including ourselves, including the blog, which has about 130 different articles now on different aspects of not just using Quirkos, but qualitative methodology in general. So here's one on, what have we got here? What's grounded theory? So we talked about grounded theory. So here's one about grounded theory. You'll also find on our website, we've got a forum as well where people are asking questions. Frequently asked questions is very useful. And then we've also got a list of all the workshops and events which are coming up soon. But also do contact us if you have any questions. We're always here to answer your questions. You can phone us, you can contact us on Skype, Twitter, or email us directly. We'll always try and help you out however we can. So do have a look. Do ask us if you've got any questions if you get stuck. I have to say most people don't. We get very few questions of people getting stuck. So dig in, play, explore, and try for yourself and see if this is the option that works out for you. Thanks very much for coming along today. I've not had any questions, so last chance to ask them. But otherwise, I will sign off here. And thanks so much for your time.